Hello, and welcome to our fourth Bookalope screencast. In our last video, we talked about Bookalope's text import options and how style filters help us simplify and clean up the visual design of our book. In today's video, we will finish importing our manuscript by helping Bookalope derive the structure of our book from the visual design of our manuscript. We've already talked about the import options section and the style filters section in our last video. In addition to those two, Bookalope shows us a third section that contains our manuscript with most of its visual text styles. As you can see, our manuscript is a flat list of paragraphs. Every paragraph has a visual styling that reflects its intended structural element, like chapter title or text. We will now review all paragraphs one by one to make sure that Bookalope identified the book's structure correctly. If necessary, we will make adjustments and add information. Whenever we hover our mouse over a paragraph, Bookalope will present us with the structure information it has extracted from our manuscript. We can now review that information, and we can make adjustments if necessary. In the top left corner is a drop-down box that tells us the type of the current paragraph. A paragraph can be a title for a chapter, a section, subsection, or sub-subsection. It can be an item for a numbered or bullet list, it can be a separator, or it can be a text paragraph of different sorts, like a quote or a poem. We can also tell Bookalope to ignore and skip a paragraph altogether. Just right of the paragraph type is a small I. When we hover our mouse over it, Bookalope shows us all relevant styling information for this paragraph. We will use this information later on. Bookalope correctly identified this first paragraph as a chapter title, which means that we want to open a new chapter here. It is important to know that whenever we open a new chapter, we implicitly create a new page break for our ebook, and, depending on the final book design, a new page break for the printed book as well. We can also specify exactly what kind of chapter we want to open. The chapter kind will later dictate the visual design in our final book, and it will also generate better navigation information for the final ebook. Here, for example, we tell Bookalope that this chapter is the title page of our book. We also would like to remove this chapter from the book's table of contents. But we do not want to hide the chapter title, the paragraph's text, itself. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Bookalope already identified it as a normal text paragraph, and we can leave it at that. This text paragraph belongs to the title page chapter that we just started. We don't worry about styling because Bookalope will style this text for us later. We also don't want to open a new chapter with this paragraph, so let's leave that option unchecked. Next follows a page break. We could ignore it, in which case the next paragraphs would become part of the current chapter. That is not what we want. Instead, we open a new chapter and we make it the copyright chapter. Again, telling Bookalope the chapter kind will determine its visual design later and improves the ebook navigation. The next two paragraphs are already identified as normal text paragraphs, and we can leave it at that. But before we continue, let's take a closer look at what Bookalope flagged here. When we look at the styles for this paragraph, then we see that we've used the Palatino font at 11-point size. Looking at the highlighted text portion in this paragraph, we see that the style for this text portion changed. It now uses italic. Bookalope needs to understand the intention of this style change. Did we try to emphasize this text portion? Is this an unintended style change? Did we mean to make a strong statement? In this case here, we wanted to emphasize this book title, and Bookalope has identified this style change correctly. The following page break needs to open a new chapter again, and this chapter is our book's dedication page. Then the next paragraph is just a normal text paragraph for the dedication chapter, and we move on. Again, the next page break opens a new chapter, and its 3 paragraphs are normal text paragraphs. The table of contents was not identified correctly, and we now tell Bookalope that this paragraph is actually a chapter title. We also tell Bookalope that this chapter is the table of contents chapter kind, and now Bookalope generates the table of contents automatically. Of course, we like to remove the table of contents chapter from the table of contents itself. And because Bookalope generates its own table of contents, we can ignore and skip the one that is in our manuscript. Bookalope has already done that for us. The introduction paragraph is already marked as a chapter, and we may want to change its kind to introduction as well. Again, this improves the navigation of the ebook. The next 2 paragraphs are text paragraphs, and we keep moving on through our manuscript. This 3rd text paragraph contains several text portions with style changes for us to review, and they are all correctly identified as emphasized text. Notice that the blue text portions are footnotes. In all cases, hovering our mouse over the little I offers us guidance. We keep moving on and we revisit each paragraph. The preparation is a chapter title, correct, followed by several normal text paragraphs. Those paragraphs have no text portions with a changing style. The Yourself chapter title was identified correctly too, and all of the chapter's contents are normal text paragraphs. And the same with the Spiritual Friend chapter and all of its paragraphs. This all looks good. The next chapter title, Light, Expansive, Uplifted, has 2 paragraphs that contain emphasized text, and Bookalope got them right. The Joy chapter too. There are several text portions with style changes, and Bookalope identified them all correctly as emphasized text. The 3rd paragraph, though, contains a period with a style change. This is a leftover from our word processor, and we can tell Bookalope to treat this style change as normal text, which will remove all visual and structural significance from this text portion. At the end of this chapter is a poem, but Bookalope marked these paragraphs as normal text. We now change the paragraph type of the first line to poem. The styling for this paragraph is centered text, Palatino, 11-point size, italic. By using the Apply to Same button on the right, we now tell Bookalope to mark all paragraphs with that exact same styling as poem, and we do the same with the last paragraph. Let's move on. The next few chapters all look good. There's a blue footnote in the Breath Awareness chapter, and several emphasized text portions in the 6 R's chapter. In this case, we can leave them as emphasized, or we could change them to strong, whichever suits us best. Next follows the continuity chapter and all its content, and all paragraph types are identified correctly. And the impersonal chapter too. Everything looks good. The Awareness is Magic chapter contains 4 bullet list items, and Bookalope identified all of them correctly. The poem at the end of this chapter is already marked as poem, because the Apply to Same button we used earlier applied the settings across the entire document. All paragraphs of the next 2 chapters, Buddha's Map and Teaspoon of Salt, are also identified correctly, including the poem at the end of the chapter. The paragraphs of the last chapter, Resources, are different. Notice that they have an extra left margin of 6 mm. We know that these paragraphs aren't normal text, but individual paragraphs that list related work. So let's mark them as first paragraph. That tells Bookalope to treat each paragraph like a first paragraph of a new section. Click the Apply to Same button to affect all paragraphs with this 6mm left margin styling. And that's it. We've reviewed the structure that Bookalope has derived from our visual styling of our manuscript, and we adjusted things when necessary. We now click the Confirm Structure button. Bookalope structures our manuscript and finishes the import. In our next video, we will talk about checking and fixing issues of our text content. That is the last step before we convert our manuscript for publication. Thank you for watching.